Let's dive underwater and look at some floating worm options. We'll hit a couple of different plastic types of lures, and also rigging methods. My hope is you will be able to dial in what is best for your fishing style and fishery. Now, the plastics I have here are traditional plastisol worms, both in the popular Zoom trick worm and a Senko, and I also have a Strike King Super Finesse worm made from Elastec. For rigging methods, I used both a direct line tied to the hook and also another one with the swivel about a foot up the line. Plus, we'll take a look at one of Mike Iaconelli's favorite floating worm tips that changes the entire look of the presentation. Well, let's start with the traditional floating worm setup with the standard trick worm. The version with the swivel is on the right of your screen, and without the swivel is on the left. I fish it both ways, but use the swivel most often, especially when using Ike's little tip we'll see in a minute. Now, as you can see, the small swivel does have a considerable impact on how the lure behaves. Of course, plastisol will sink on its own anyway, but the setup without the swivel does sink nice and slowly. I often opt for a smaller than normal light wire offset worm hook when fishing the floating worm presentation. Some of the standard wire hooks are a lot heavier and make a big difference in how fast the lure drops. I often get asked why bright colors when fishing a floating worm. Well, that's a great question. Of course, you can fish any color you want, but bright colors, including white, are a lot easier for us as anglers to see at a distance. And floating worm fishing is a really fun visual way to fish. It helps to see that bright worm so you know that if it vanishes, a fish might just have it. And a lot of anglers feel bright worms trigger more bites in the spring. Now, here is the Elastec worm. Same setup. The rigging with the swivel is on your right and no swivel on the left. I like the version with the swivel when fishing Elastec worms because they are so buoyant. The little extra weight up the line creates a nice sinking presentation. Now, if you want that lure to sit in one spot, then the no swivel Elastec worm is perfect. But at least here you can see the differences so you can dial in your presentation perfectly. Next is the Senko. Now, I don't fish a stick bait with a floating worm presentation that often, but I wanted to film it because lots and lots of anglers do. The heavier salt impregnated lure drops much quicker, especially if you opt for a swivel up the line. There is just something though about a stick bait that gets bit. It is no exception here, and quite often on the drop you can see the lure falling with the famous shimmy a Senko is known for. Now, let's look at that tip I picked up from Mike Iaconelli. It looks a little weird, but wow, does it add a lot of action to a floating worm. When rigging the lure, put a little bend in it on purpose. I know we are so picky about rigging lures straight. This, at least for me, is hard to force myself to do. Visually, it looks all messed up. But watch what happens. All of a sudden, when you twitch that lure, it dances all around. And you can see here why the rigging option with the swivel is nice to stop any potential line twist. There are days when this little extra random darting action can really fire the fish up. It's an easy modification that you can experiment with and see how it works for you. And hey, if you want to watch a video that talks about one of my favorite fluke fishing tips as far as the fleeing bait fish method is concerned, go ahead and check this one out right here, and make sure that you go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.